Okay, hello everyone. We're getting ready to get started. If everyone could just reply in the questions field just to make sure you can hear me and see the slide, I'd appreciate that. All right, so we're getting started here. This is a free Lightspeed webinar, social media predictive data for professional traders. We're going to run through just a couple of quick slides before we turn it over to our presenter. Unfortunately, I do need to read a disclaimer before we begin. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Nothing presented today should be construed as investment advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any security or contract. Since we don't know everyone's investment objectives or risk tolerance, we are not endorsing any specific trading strategies. Security, derivative, and futures trading involves a substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Each investor must consider whether this is a suitable investment, since you may lose all or more than your initial investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Lightspeed is a division of Lime Brokerage LLC. Lime Brokerage LLC is not affiliated with these third-party market commentators, educators, or service providers. Data, information, and material are provided for informational and educational purposes only. This content neither is nor should be construed as an offer, solicitation, or recommendation to buy, sell any securities or contracts. Any investment decisions made by the users through the use of such content is solely based on the user's independent analysis, taking into consideration your financial circumstances, investment objectives, and risk tolerance. Lime Brokerage LLC does not endorse, offer, nor recommend any of the services or commentary provided by any of the market commentators, educators, or service providers, and any information used to execute any trading strategies are solely based on the independent analysis of the user. Okay, so now that we are done with that, my name is Joe Ely. I'm a registered representative here at Lightspeed. For more information about Lightspeed or a potential demo of the Lightspeed Trader platform, please contact me. My name and email is posted there. Email is jely@limebrokerage.com. I'd be more than happy to help you out. So our presenter today, Joe Gitz. He's a CFA. Joe is a pioneer in the emergence and growth of quantitative trading systems. Prior to launching Social Media Analytics, SMA, he co-founded Quantitative Analytics Inc., QA Direct, a market-leading provider of integrated database solutions for quantitative researchers and traders. So we're very happy and pleased to have Joe here today. I'm going to turn over the audio and the control of the presentation to him. He's going to bring up his slides. It should just take a minute or so. So just bear with us, and we'll get started.
Well, first of all, Joe, thank you very much for inviting us to do this webinar today. We appreciate it, and we're pretty excited about the widgets that are available on the Lightspeed platform. And I hope that you and the audience enjoy this presentation and learn something. Now, my email address isn't here, but I can give it to you right now. If you have any other questions or have any follow-up that you'd like to do with us, it'd be Joeg, at socialmarketanalytics.com. And you can also find it on our website. So on today's webinar, I want to go through 4 different things, and I'm going to start with really a broad topic: the use of alternative data in finance. So how the use of alternative data is growing, what is alternative data, what's the growth rate of this kind of content. We're going to touch on that a little bit, and then talk about how hedge funds and buy-side firms are using this data and how it's applicable to the professional trader. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the framework, so how we do what we do. So what does the process look like from someone writing a tweet all the way through our S-score and the signals that are available on the Lightspeed platform? What is the general value of social media-based analytics for the professional investor? And then how that data is implemented on the Lightspeed platform. So the widgets that are there and what they mean to the individual investor. And now I'm going to take periodic breaks. If anybody has questions, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and you can I'll answer them, or Joe, if you can read them to me, that'd be great. Now, what makes this slide interesting is that 5 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, when I would start a presentation, I would sometimes have to say, what is a tweet? what does it mean? What's in there? And nowadays, it's a really common means of communication. Pretty much everyone I know uses it. It's talked about in the news and over again that you see that the source for news stories is Twitter, initially Twitter. So there are about 1 billion tweets generated a day worldwide. So these tweets are coming from business centers. So you see North America, you see Japan, you see Asia. These tweets are coming in 24/7 in many different languages, and they are representing conversations that are happening around the globe in financial center. And as this information is breaking on a real-time basis, it becomes ever more important to movements of security prices. It can be anything from an acceptance of a drug to an explosion at an oil refinery to the outbreak of war, or to a global pandemic and the ability to treat a global pandemic. Twitter is more and more, with this COVID-19 world that we're living in, Twitter is more and more a way to communicate information. And you see that in the numbers, you see that in the monthly active user counts on Twitter. It's growing exponentially. So I am going to move my slide here. All right. So the end result of these tweets is that social media is disrupting capital markets. So Twitter impacts the price performance of all securities, and it's creating investment opportunities on a global basis. Just in recent examples, if someone gets a sniff that a company might have a cure for COVID or a treatment for COVID or any kind of influence on the whole pandemic, that security is shooting through the roof, and you're seeing this information breaking on Twitter all the time. So this is just one example of disrupting capital markets. And you have things like explosions, car fires, any number of different pieces of information that are breaking on Twitter, and it's flowing through and ultimately affecting the pricing of securities. Now, I'm going to date myself here, but it's a good example. So when I started my career, I was in the S&P pit in Chicago at the Merc. And before a big move in the market, you could feel the energy in the pit. So whether it's the pit physically increasing in size, or whether the din of the pit, the volume increasing, and that's why a lot of firms pump that noise into their trading room. I feel like, and what I've seen in the data is that Twitter is that new feeling of the pit. It's that new noise, it's a new activity that you don't have anymore because we don't have any trading pits. So think of it that way. It's that canary in the coal mine, both positive and negative, and it's the new feeling of the market as a whole. So hang on a second, I think okay. So I talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Alternative data is growing mainstream. There are statistics out there that say up to 90% of new content being created is what's called unstructured data. What is unstructured data or alternative data? Alternative data is simply data that hasn't been used in the investment process before. That can be anything from foot traffic in malls to credit card information to, in our case, a natural language processing on a Twitter feed. It could be analysis of what we call exhaust data. So overall, the number of people talking about a particular security. So alternative data is just data that doesn't fit in the traditional framework. For example, not price to book, cash flow, expected earnings, moving averages, price, or specific textual based data. You're going to find a lot of this alternative data, as I mentioned, is textual data. And I think with the explosion of computing power and the explosion of the cloud, the alpha that you see from your traditional data sets is decreased dramatically, because the advantage that the professional houses out there, the hedge funds, the major investment firms out there, was their computing power historically. They've been able to take this data and compute metrics and analytics much more quickly than the average person. But with the advent of the cloud and the ability to scale processing power, that advantage is decreased. And thereby the alpha generated from traditional data sources has decreased. That's forced these hedge funds and these firms and professional investors to look elsewhere. So that's the reason for the explosion of alternative data, is to recapture that alpha. And you can see that in the growth in alternative data. So the blue line, and this stops in 17, but it is absolutely 100% continuing to grow exponentially. So the number of alternative data analysts, these are analysts that specialize in alternative data, so they could be statistics or data analytics majors in college, that number has grown exponentially. And these guys are using R and Python and MATLAB to go in and run this data. And the number of investment funds employing alternative data has grown dramatically as well. And you see these statistics, 80 to 85% of hedge funds out there over the next couple of years want to use it, are either using alternative data or want to be using alternative data in the investment process. And so that number is dramatic. So really these numbers, your competition of these professional hedge funds, the competition out there, they're using this data, and Lightspeed has a huge advantage because they've taken the lead in integrating this data into your existing platform. So how can we help in that process? So I spent the prior 2 slides talking about why this data is important, and now how can SMA help? So you had a little bit in there about my bio. So when we started this company, we wanted to convert the unstructured data, specifically in Twitter, that's where we started, into quantitative signals that investors could use. Okay, so our mission statement is to become the unstructured leader in finance, to be the unstructured leader in finance. So we harness these Twitter signals, so we take the tweets and we analyze them to deliver real-time sentiment to professional traders, hedge funds, asset managers, market makers, risk managers, anyone that needs to have access to that new feeling of the pit. That's what we do. So we are a licensed, certified partner of Twitter. We do have access to the full Twitter fire hose, and we do a couple of different things with it. So this is our framework, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot about it, but I'm going to lay out exactly how we turn that tweet into a signal that Lightspeed traders can use to make better investment decisions as a toolbox in there, as a tool in their investment decision toolbox. So the extractor is a tool that we've created that allows us to listen to really any unstructured data. So whether it's Twitter, whether it's filings, whether it's a news story, whether it's a troubled company report, anything that is textual in nature is read by the extractor. So for Twitter, what we're doing is we're listening to that full Twitter fire hose, and we're pulling out anything related to topics that we're interested in. Now, probably your default thought is that a topic is a ticker symbol. That's one of the things that we're grabbing in our topic model. So for example, if we're looking at Tesla, we obviously have TSLA, we have Elon Musk in there, we have a not for Nikolai Tesla, we might have Model X, some people refer to it as TSLAQ. So there are a whole series, it's a Boolean-based system that allows us to make sure that we're grabbing a robust conversation about every security that we're interested in. So a topic is used to pull tweets off the Twitter fire hose. Okay, so a couple things happen. Those are being published, those sentiment scores are being published in real time. And then we're also aggregating into our S-factor data, which is what is on the Lightspeed platform. So the extractor basically takes in all the data, and then it goes into the evaluator. So there are a couple things in the evaluator. We evaluate one on the accounts. So for anyone that's ever tweeted about a security, we have a corpus of their tweets. We have their full history of their tweets at that point in time, and then we analyze that data and we score. So we know who the most accurate people are on Twitter, who's consistently wrong. We have a series of 12 different metrics that we've used to allow us to score individual accounts, because early on when we were starting the company, we learned pretty quickly that it's not just what's being said, but who's saying it that's important. So we have right now about 100,000 certified accounts out of the entire Twitter sphere, and these 100,000 accounts talk about securities. They're often retweeted. People reply to them. We don't use number of followers as one of our metrics because that can be a game. So that's the first thing. We look at the account. So is this one of our certified accounts? And we've actually built some really cool widgets with Lightspeed on those accurate accounts. We'll look at those in a second. And then the second thing we do is we do our own custom natural language processing. We built it entirely from scratch. It's a multi-pass phrase evaluation approach. So we start by trying to read the entire tweet, and then we break it down to its individual components. We're trying to get noun, adjective, verb, and each tweet ultimately will get a sentiment score ranging from -1, being extremely negative, about as negative as you can get, to +1, being extremely positive. And we actually calculate that out to 4 decimal places. So it's It's what we call fine-grained scoring in the business, not a bucketed scoring, either positive or negative, or even a 3-bucket scoring, positive, negative, or neutral. We actually do fine-grained scoring. So every tweet in 0.3 of a second generates a sentiment score. And then the calculator does a number of different things. It does a number of metrics on that data, with the primary metric being a comparison of the current conversation relative to historical values, so what we call our S scores, and they're basically statistical Z's. Now I'll stop here for a second, and Joe, were there any questions? Can you look at the stream for me?
Yeah, there are no questions thus far.
Okay, great. So that's the process. So this is running 24/7. We're listening to the full Twitter fire hose, and we're publishing these metrics 24/7 in your Lime Lightspeed front end. It has these metrics changing 24/7. So now, when I said we calculate these metrics, basically this is what we're looking at. So we calculate a baseline level of conversation for every security. All right, so we know what a normal level of conversation is for Tesla. We know what a normal level of conversation is for Microsoft, for every company. So we publish, as a matter of fact, yesterday I know we published, there was enough Twitter conversation to publish metrics on 3,400 securities. So on any given day, we'll publish metrics on about 3,400 securities. And these metrics describe that individual security conversation relative to those historical levels. All of the comparisons are on a security by security basis. So we're publishing, our S score is basically statistical Z. So is the current conversation over the last 24 hours for stock XYZ 2 standard deviations more positive than it was over the last 20 days, or maybe 2 standard deviations more negative over the last 20 days? Most of those conversations hover around 0, but when you start seeing them on the wings, so maybe 1, 1.5, 2 standard deviations, that there's statistically significant predictive power in that data. Right? Those securities tend to move higher, or those securities tend to move lower. And as this chart mentions, 2 standard deviations, I believe, is 98.6. That means the current conversation is more positive than 98.6% of prior conversations. Okay. And now there are a number of, I'll go back for a second. There are a number of metrics that we're publishing. So S score is where you are on the standard normal curve. So in this case, if I'm 2 standard deviations, I'm over here. If I'm -2, I'm over here. We have an S mean, which is an average level of conversation. So what is the average sentiment level? We also have SV score. So what is volume on that? And we'll talk more about that when we look at the widgets. But is the volume of tweets for that particular security significantly higher than normal or significantly lower than normal? And then we have a dispersion metric, which is kind of unique to this type of data. That tells you what percentage of tweets come from unique accounts. So you don't want one account, you don't want a signal where all the tweets are coming from one account. That would tell you that that's really just one man's opinion or woman's opinion. This is, what we're doing here is we want a high dispersion. So a dispersion of 1 would mean that all of the tweets are coming from unique accounts. Okay, and we'll explore this more as we look at some of the widgets. So why is this relevant? How can this help Lime Lightspeed traders make better trading decisions? Well, it is social media is a leading indicator of security performance. We see it time and time again. Outside of even the breaking news, when the conversation gets more positive from these professional investors, those securities subsequently go out to and outperform. When the conversation gets significantly more negative, those securities tend to go on and underperform. And that is from both an intraday basis, well, to day, week, and even longer. And you see that over and over again, and that's consistent across all market caps, and it's consistent across different sectors and industry types as well. So it's an indicator of price movement in securities. As I mentioned, securities on Twitter, they outperform if the conversation is significantly more positive. They underperform if the conversation is significantly more negative. New trade ideas. Now that's a good one, because in the Lime Lightspeed widget, it's going to present to you securities that maybe you didn't think of coming in trading today. So a security that maybe you haven't thought of, or maybe that you hadn't traded in a while, pops up on the top 10 or bottom 10 widgets. that's going to bring an idea that maybe you can make some quick money trading, scalping, or however you trade. So it brings new trading ideas. These are securities that the rest of the Twitter sphere is talking about, either positive or negative, and it gives you an opportunity to identify a possible new trading idea. Position monitoring, that's an easy one. If you have a long position in a security and all of a sudden the sentiment on that security goes incredibly negative, or there's a big decrease in the delta in our metric is a 1 minute change over the last 15 minutes. If there's a big drop in delta, then perhaps that's something you want to look at. Maybe you want to look at news or look at Twitter and look and make sure that indeed something isn't breaking that can affect your position. And then obviously trade execution. So we have a number of customers that are using our data in their execution algos. So if they have to buy a security and they see that the sentiment is rising, maybe they're going to try and buy it more quickly because there's a tendency for that security to move higher. If they're going to sell a security and that sentiment is positive, then maybe they want to wait a little bit and try and capture some of that pending move, that statistically significant move that may be coming. Any questions on this, Joe? Okay, then I'm going to continue if there are no questions. So how has this data been implemented on the Lightspeed platform? So we built a number of widgets that we're really excited about. We think they really do a nice job of conveying the appropriate information on Twitter. The first one that we're going to look at is a top 10 sentiment, and that's like the name implies. So it looks at the securities that are currently having the highest positive conversation. The opposite of that would be the bottom 10 sentiment. These are the securities that are currently having the most negative conversation. And this is right now. So this is in the last minute, over 24 hours compared to a 20-day baseline. So the conversation on these stocks is very negative. Accurate account long side. So of the most accurate accounts, what are these most accurate accounts talking about? What securities are they talking about that they currently have a positive sentiment on? And the opposite of that are the accurate account short side. So of those most accurate accounts, what securities are they currently most bearish about? And then sentiment by symbol. Your traditional, if you enter a security, it gives you the sentiment. So what we're trying to do in a lot of systems and on a lot of platforms out there, you have to enter the security and it'll give you back information. That's like the sentiment by symbol. But what we're trying to do with these implementations on Lightspeed is we are trying to bring new ideas to you to help you be a better trader. And that's a big difference. So rather than you having to know right off the bat what security you're trading, this is bringing new ideas that perhaps can help you be a better trader. So on the platform, here's some widgets and what they mean. So this one is a top 10 sentiment that we were talking about a little bit earlier. So it shows the most positively talked about securities on Twitter ranked by our S score. That is that comparison of the last 24-hour conversation with the 20-day baseline. So let's look at diffusion pharmaceuticals. And with the COVID pandemic, you see a lot of pharmaceutical companies up there. So that S score, what does this S score mean? And if you click on the eye, it'll give you information on what that metric means. So that'll pop out a little help screen that'll define that metric. So 4.2243 means that the current conversation is more positive than 99.something% of prior conversation. So people are very positive right now on Twitter about that particular security. The 23 means once we're all done with our filtering, so we filter an incredible amount of tweets on a daily basis. The vast majority of tweets are filtered out as not being particularly relevant. Once we're done filtering, there are 23 relevant securities in this period. And then the SV score it basically tells you whether or not the volume on that particular, the tweet volume, let me make that clear, the tweet volume for that particular security is higher than normal. So let's interpret diffusion pharmaceutical. The current conversation is more positive than 99% of prior conversations. And relative to that security, there's a very high number of tweets for that security. So the baseline number of tweets for that security is much lower than what happened in that individual period. So they're talking, a lot more people are writing a lot more tweets more positively than normal for diffusion pharmaceuticals. Okay, and look at this one, Zoom, which is what the entire world is using right now. I wish I knew what the date was on this particular graph. Oh, here we go. Oh, January 7th. Okay, so that was at the start of the pandemic. Okay. All right, so opposite, bottom sentiment. Okay. The bottom 10 sentiment securities is basically the opposite. So currently stocks that people are talking a lot more negatively about than they have over the last 20 days. Okay, so in this case, Oracle, number 2. The current conversation as of January 7th with nearly 4 standard deviations more negative than normal. Okay, and then the volume on that particular security, and then it had a high relative volume. So people are talking a lot more negatively about Oracle with a really high volume. And when you see these S scores at this statistical level, most of the time the SV score is going to be very high as well. You're going to have more people talking about a particular security in order to drive the sentiment to that level. If you see a high S score with an SV score of around 0, you might want to think about that particular signal. But these are all high S scores, and I believe the top 10 was all high SV scores as well. Okay. These widgets are updated every minute on your screen, so there's some that you should be checking in with on a regular basis. Okay. Accurate accounts. So these widgets look at the specific account level accuracy for these securities, and they're identifying the accounts that are most accurate, and then we're saying, hey, what securities are these people talking about? What securities are these people talking negatively about? And this is over a couple different time periods. So on the widget, you could select 1 day, 2 day, 1 week, and 1 month holding period, and these numbers will change. So let me show you how to interpret this. So this is saying, if you look at, you see data for who are the most accurate analysts, who are the least accurate analysts. This is very similar to that, except for the Twitter universe. So at the end of each day, we take an aggregation at the account level of sentiment per security, and we're identifying the stock. We're identifying whether or not a particular account is positive or negative about a security, and then we're going through time and back testing whether or not when that particular sentiment was positive, that security subsequently outperformed. So on microchip technology, there are currently only 5 of the accurate accounts talking about this particular security, but 4 out of 5 of those are positive. Okay.
Joe, 2 questions popped up in the last 2 minutes. Great. I don't know if you want them now or if you want to wait.
Sure. Let's shoot now.
Yeah, so the first one is from Jeffrey. He asks, does this widget come at an extra cost?
I don't believe so. You guys don't charge for that, right? It's included on the platform.
No, Lightspeed doesn't charge for it, no.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, it's on there, and you can use it. So you have access to that widget, no problem at all. It's on the platform. So if you have a Lightspeed account, you get access to it.
Yep. Second question from Scott says, what is an average SVOL or SV score?
Great question. All right, so let's go back up here. So most securities, I'm going to look at most securities on a given day have an S score around 0. Okay, so that means the current if an S score is 0, that means the current conversation is exactly the average over the last 20 days. And to put it in numbers, so out of the S&P 500 universe, on the long side, you'll get about 80 stocks, 90 stocks that have an S score of 2 or higher. So that gives you an idea that these securities do move around. On the negative side, so an S score less than -2, 50, 60 stocks will have an S score less than that -2 value. So an average is 0. You're looking for the wings. So you won't get statistically significant data on every security every day. SV score, you will see stocks with significant SV scores without a significantly high S score. Again, most stock volume SV score hovers around 0 because that means that most of the volume is normal. So we're looking at these on a normal curve. And you'll see some negative SV scores, but when you're looking for a signal, you want a positive SV score. So you want the volume on Twitter to be higher than normal. So Scott, I hope that answered your question. And please post again if I didn't, and I'll try again. All right.
Yeah, we have another question here. Seth asks, do you have an alert notification for your custom watch list?
We do. We haven't implemented it on the Lime Lightspeed platform yet. I know that's in the development queue, but there is some alerting capabilities available. Yes, the short answer is yes. It's not implemented on the Lime Lightspeed platform yet, but we'll take that away. I know it's in the development queue, and we can hit that. And if you're looking for that, you can also contact us as well. But yeah, it is going to be available shortly on the Lightspeed platform. Yeah, alerts are really powerful. We see alerts hitting all the time, and we have a lot of different types of alerts. But you'll see time and time again an alert on Twitter hit, and then you'll see something on the news. For example, when this was a number maybe a year ago, when the U.S. sent a bunch of cruise missiles into Syria, and we sent a huge number of cruise missiles into Syria. We got an alert up to 10 minutes before on Raytheon and Raytheon makes these particular cruise missiles, a buy alert on Raytheon before any of this information had hit the news, just as an example. The United Airlines accommodation from last year, that one broke on a Saturday on Twitter, and it was, the alerts were firing off like crazy that whole weekend. So the short answer is alerts are really powerful. They give you information right when it breaks, and part of the alerts is it shows you a sampling of tweets that are what we consider to be moving the security. So you'll see the alert, whether it's sentiment or volume, and then you'll see a sampling of tweets as to what we think is moving it. So yeah, alerts are very powerful. That's a good question. Any more, Scott? I'm sorry. Any more, Joe?
No, that's all we have for now. Cool.
All right. So I'm gonna continue. So I love this particular page. This is a really powerful page. It's not available anywhere else. So again, so Salesforce, out of 15 of the most accurate accounts, 73% of them are positive. Row 3 here. 13% of them are negative for a one-day holding period. So these are the people that supposedly their historical data has shown that they're accurate, are positive on these particular securities. So again, it's unique on this platform that it shows you, it brings new trading ideas to the forefront, and it has statistical significance behind them. And then the opposite one, and this one is funny because Twitter, 36% of the accurate accounts are positive on it, and 45% of the accurate accounts are negative, and 11 of the accurate accounts are talking about Twitter on this particular day over a one-day holding period. So that's a toggle switch that you can look at, and you'll see that sentiment changes over different holding periods. So this is 24 hours versus a 20-day baseline. We have some people that look at 50-day summations over a 200-day baseline, and that gives you a longer signal. So it's a lot of different ways that you could use this particular widget, and these are particularly powerful. We have a number of our customers who are taking an accurate account feed, and they're using that to create metrics on that. And then the sentiment by security. So if you have a security that you're interested in looking at, and you really want to see what's going on from a sentiment perspective, the sentiment by symbol page is a really good way to do that. So in the upper left-hand corner of that page, you see the S score. That's what we were showing in the previous widget. So a negative 1.49 for Apple. So the current conversation on Apple, I want to say that's 65, is more negative than 65% of prior conversations. The SV score, so volume, SV score, which is right below it, is 0.38. So that's pretty much, that's pretty much zero. So you have a normal level of conversation, 284 tweets during that time period. Half of the tweets are coming from unique accounts. So of these 284, there are 142 accounts talking about these. So that was 284 times 0.54. And then you have the date and time. So I'm sorry, guys. Like the rest of the world, I'm working from home, and that's the house phone. All right, so apologize. All right. So in the upper right-hand corner, we have the speedometer, and this is one that always gets a lot of usage. And so this is just showing where it sits on the overall skew. So in this case, Apple, it's negative, but not extreme negative. And this is running on a real-time basis, so you'll see the speedometer moving back and forth. And so this is a negative point. This is the delta, I believe, a negative 0.79%, or that might be price. I'm not sure right off the top of my head, but you can see the info on that particular page, and that'll show you what it is. And then down at the bottom, we have a time series of sentiment. So this is one day. What is the sentiment on that particular security done over the last day? And then you can specify week, month, 6 month, and 1 year as well. And then we have volume over that period with whether or not there was a positive or negative change in sentiment. So the green bar obviously indicates a positive change in sentiment, and a red bar indicates a negative change in sentiment. So all the volume metrics on these widgets represent tweet volume, just to be clear. It's not trading volume or share volume for that particular day. All the volume that we reference is tweet volume. Okay. Joe, any questions? Okay.
Sorry, no questions right now.
Okay, cool. So on the desktop application implementation, and I'm not an expert on the front end, but you can see we have 5 different tabs that you can select to add these widgets to your desktop. So the top 10, bottom 10 that we showed a little bit earlier. You have your sentiment chart, which is your time series chart. Your account accuracy widgets that shows you what the most accurate people are talking about, either positive or negative. The sentiment odometer, that's the speedometer that we were showing a little bit earlier, and then a frequently asked question page. So how to define the data, what does the data mean from a user perspective, and those pages are pretty nicely written and pretty easy to understand. And then here's the different widgets that we were talking about. So here's your here for Beyond Meat, here's your S-score chart. Here is your volume. Here is your top and bottom 10. Here's your here's your bottom 10. Here's your top 10. Here's your accurate account. Here's your accurate account positive, accurate account negative. And the difference between the positive and negative are accounts that have no opinion or zero sentiment. And then here is your speedometer that you can go in and use. So we're really excited to have these widgets on the platform. We think that it's going to help you guys trade better, make better decisions, and hopefully bring new profitable ideas into your toolbox. And as I mentioned, I gave you my email address earlier. You can also reach support@socialmarketanalytics.com, and we're more than happy to answer any questions, and we're always looking for feedback.
Another question popped up here. Do you have any backtesting results?
Yes, we do. We have some charts, and we should make those available. I don't know if there's a follow-up on this, but we have return statistics on all sorts of different holding periods. So we have returns from when you look at pre-market open signals, and that's what when I was talking about how this data is statistically significant at all sorts of different levels. One of the follow-ups on the next webinar, I'll show you some of those backtest return charts. But we have charts that go from pre-market close to the next open, from pre-market close today to close tomorrow, from pre-market open to open to close on that particular day. We have different portfolios. Yeah, there's a whole set. And you actually, if you go to, there's a new blog post, a Lime Lightspeed blog post that was posted. I think it was posted today, and it goes through some of those backtest results. I know some of our guys are on here. Can you guys put in the comment whether or not that blog post was up? Or Joe, do you know?
No, I'm not sure. I didn't see.
Okay, because yeah, there's a blog post, a Lime Lightspeed blog post that should have gone up today before the webinar that goes through some of those backtest results. But yeah, we do. Any other questions, Joe?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, again, guys, take a look at this data. I think it'll help you be more effective. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to answer them for you, and happy to help you with any of those questions. All right, thank you, guys.
Yes, Joe, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Everyone that attended, we hope you learned something and can take advantage of this offer that Lightspeed has with SMA. It's definitely a benefit to the platform and to our traders. Everyone, have a good evening, and thanks for joining us again. Have a good one. Bye-bye.